What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Stage. I think the intro didn't play there, but that's okay. Rolling with the technical difficulties. This is a live stream after all. So my name is Eddie. I'm the host of Tech Backstage. Here with our guest today, Vivek, who is the VP of Engineering at Taxbit. Taxbit, sorry. Vivek, how you doing today?
Doing very good. Well, how is everyone doing? Thank you for having me here. My dog
Yeah,
might be behind me doing things, so let's just ignore him.
that's totally okay. I close my doors right before the podcast because otherwise the cats and the dog are in here like trying to like jump up on my lap because they're lap dog and lap cat. So thanks for being here today. Really appreciate you taking the time to sit down and chat with us for 30 minutes. First and foremost, love what you guys are doing, and I think TaxBit super innovative, and especially with everything that's happening around crypto right now. I know that for a lot of investors and people that are in the crypto space, taxes and tax compliance and being able to actually have solid accounting around that has always been a challenge. So really excited to chat with what you guys are doing on the talent side today at TaxBit. But before we dive too much into that, I'd love to tell the listeners and the viewers a little bit about you, hear a little bit about your origin story, and how you ended up at TaxBit.
For sure. So I've been at TaxBit for a little over 4 months now, and it feels like decades, like any hypergrowth startup should feel like. But prior to TaxBit, I was at Meta for almost 6 years, Facebook, if you don't know that term. I was doing their audio video calling software and then also build stuff like SMS and Android Messenger, a lot of consumer tech, billions of people using the software. I managed the organization that did both product and platform for our remote presence across Instagram, WhatsApp, Facebook, as well as Facebook Messenger. Um, Before that, I had an incubation team for several years at Microsoft, and then I spent 8 years building Bing when it was MSN Search, and then grew that to 20% query share against Google. So lots of big tech, lots of distributed computing background, consumer background. TaxBit is super new to me. Like there's several new things that is really exciting in terms of learning. I'm learning Web3, I'm learning enterprise software, and I'm learning how to operate in a fast pace. Like even though Facebook operates really, really rapidly in execution, TaxBit being in this hyper growth mode where it's existential is really interesting.
Oh yeah, I can imagine. And just quickly, what was there like some sort of determining factor or something that made you take the leap from big tech down to a hyper growth startup? Because that's like really trying to like almost jump on a unicorn while it's running, right? So that's got to be kind of an experience in and of itself. Tell us a little bit about that.
I was actually looking for it. So I would say I found one that matched really well to the lens and aperture I was trying to look for. When we went through pandemic, I started investing in a lot of startups and then started to get in touch with VCs as well as Series A, early stage seed checks. And what I realized is all the times at Facebook and Microsoft where it was really a lot of fun, had a lot of overlap between what these companies were doing. It's like, why not go and try that? Or started talking to a lot of VCs, started talking to a lot of intros they made for their portfolio firms. And I was starting to look for things that had product market fit and I could really go and make a difference in the outcome. And the things were like, hey, is the series B early, not too late, not too early? Um, Really have a good product market fit. Execution is going to make all the difference. Growing the organization, building the organization. So my lens was very well after talking to all these things. I was like, okay, this is where I would really enjoy my next step. And I think Web3 just came along. It wasn't like I was looking for Web3. It was more like, hey, Web3 is super interesting as I'm reading more. And my origin story around early 2000s when internet was becoming huge. I was coming out of my bachelor's and the innovation was everywhere and the possibilities were endless and there were so many things. And that's, I can relate so much of what's happening in Web3. And it was just fascinating. So even though it feels hard, it was what I was seeking and it ended up being really good match.
That's great. And I totally agree with you, especially with, everything that's happening in the Web3 space right now. I always tell people that for me, it's not just about crypto and NFTs. Like what's actually happening in the Web3 space, around decentralized apps and everything else that's going to come out of it. It's the new wave of the internet, right? It's
The new
yeah,
digital money or finance. I mean, if you really think about it, financial systems have not had internet version of it. Like, companies have gone through becoming on-prem to cloud, and you see AWS and Google and Microsoft really riding that wave now, right? Where everyone
yep,
is becoming cloud native. Same thing is going to happen with financial and Web3 merging when we figure out how the shape is going to look like
yep.
in 10 years time frame, and everyone would be moving into that.
Yeah, and I agree, and I think that's what I'm really excited about too. I always tell people, for me, I think Web3 is really going to become permanent as we start to move out of this novelty phase where people are excited about investing in NFT art, and they're excited about investing in tokens and coins and stuff like that. And when it becomes less about the moonshots and becomes more about the day-to-day value that Web3 and crypto and NFTs add. My favorite example is using NFTs as tickets for events and things like that. So like when we get past the, hey, this is really cool, and we actually can start going through and really seeing the true value in it, I think that's really when it's going to solidify its place in the market. But it's absolutely coming, absolutely. So I think you guys are well positioned, to make a really bold statement in the market. I think it's really cool.
Yeah, and I've seen that before with like Facebook. We were doing audio calling. It was like, is audio calling even a feature in a messaging app like 6 years ago, right? And we
Yep.
had to really go and prove that it is valuable. People are moving away from phone. And then the underlying technology was not there, right? So if you think about bandwidth wasn't as good, video was choppy, and now 5 years, it feels like what we are doing today here, like we're broadcasting this video chat,
Yeah.
and feels like I'm sitting next to you and I'm talking to you, right? Pandemic accelerated some of this, but just go 6 years, 7 years, and this is how technology feels. It feels magical when it happens, becomes commodity. And this
Yep.
is where Web3 will be like 5, 10 years, and we wouldn't be thinking about like, oh, this felt weird 10 years ago.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. You're gonna just feel like your wallet right there is just like
Right.
secondhand. It's like it's supposed to be there.
Yep.
Um, Cool. Well, I want to jump in a little bit to the theme, and I think this is a great segue because one of the first questions I have for you, especially in a startup that's so focused on Web3 and what's happening in the crypto space, the topic for today is we're talking about talent at hypergrowth startups versus large tech, and how you're nurturing that talent, taking care of them, supporting them, right? But one of the first questions I have out of the gate is, as new as Web3 is, to the mainstream. I know that some of these theories and some of these like decentralized ideas have been around for a while, but it's just now starting to take off on the mainstream. So first and foremost, how do you even find that many people to come in and work on this application? Because I can't imagine there's a lot. It's like one of those people. They're like, oh, hey, we want 10 years of experience in this language. And you're like, that got released 3 months ago. Like, you don't have 10 years of experience. So how do you even find the right people to come in and work on this application?
Yeah, I think one of the things we are not doing a lot of what you would imagine, like Solidity or on-chain development. We are picks and shovels infrastructure for Web3. So our reason is to enable digital assets adoption globally. And the way we think about this is, if you make it no-brainer for a pension fund or institutional investor to invest in a speculative asset class with respect to regulation and compliance, they will do it. And to do all this, a lot of what we are doing is acquiring a lot of data, making sense of the data, centralizing it, standardizing it, and then doing tax calcs or accounting views on it, or KYC or AIML. So a lot of these are very Web2 centric software pipelines, even though the way you get the data, you have to understand a fragmented space of Web3. You have to go read smart contracts. You have to parse chains. So I would say a lot of our talent would look very similar to any cloud company or infrastructure company. So it's not hard. It's hard because it's for different reasons. It's not hard because the technology is new or we are not finding people who are well versed with that technology.
Got it.
The
Okay.
reason it's hard, and I can go into that a little bit, is it's, I think, realizing any startup has challenges finding talent. One, it's not paying millions of dollars like big tech are paying every year, like liquid money, right? So comp is interesting. Second thing that's interesting is people who are coming to startups, they have they're they're seeking, rather than like a lot of people are seeking FANGs, but startups is a limited pool to go after. Third is employment branding, right? So we don't like, not everyone has heard of tax, but everyone has heard of Facebook. When they talk about Facebook to their families, it's like, okay, you work at Facebook versus you work at this small company no one knows about. So there are a series of these challenges that limits the talent pool you go after. And then once you do align the mission, because you're looking for missionary people, startups are going to go sideways often, or there'll be times where macro is really bad, it gets really hard. You're looking for people who are mission aligned to what you're trying to do. So if you take slice of a slice of a slice, the talent pool, the sourcing becomes more limited from to choose from.
Okay. Yeah, and I think that totally makes sense. And you're talking about the macro right now. I think that's a really good time to highlight what's actually happening right now because if you look at the trends,
Right.
there's a lot of layoffs right now in the market, and I have my own opinion on why that is. But why do you think that we're seeing? Do you feel like people are just getting spooked, or what do you think's actually happening in the macro right now?
I think there are several things that have highlighted what's happening. One is pandemic had a different workload for a lot of companies, and they hired aggressively to meet that workload. So in some sense, they overhired for the demand that did not continue after pandemic. People went out, and you see that in a lot of tech companies where people overhired, thinking that. And if you think about remote presence, where people were on Zoom or video calling a lot, they are no longer there. So anyone who got hired to thinking about like people spending their attention span on those software, they're no longer doing it. Same thing happened with um, crypto in general, but crypto also had this other thing where lenders are starting, if you're following crypto market, I don't know, there's Luna event happened, 3AC event happened. The money is drying up and it's actually impacting all the leverage in the system. And because of that, a lot of these firms going out of business did not help. Um, so broader market going down, inflation rates going up, macro conditions not there, big tech overhired, they're starting to squeeze back. Um, Crypto in particular had other adjacent events. So if you combine all of these things, you're seeing a lot of layoffs and right sizing, and people are just getting, companies are just preparing for worse, right? If 2 years
Yep.
down, if this continues, which there's indication that this could continue for another year or more, it makes sense to right size right now.
Yeah, totally. I agree with you. And you're right. It's not a single issue that's happening. There's
I think with
it's also.
Texbit, yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, I was just going to say it can even be company specific. There's specific companies like Shopify talking about, to your point, being pandemic induced. They saw their curve and it drastically went up
Yeah.
for the e-commerce purchases, but it's now returning a little bit more to pre-COVID numbers, and so like they obviously took a bet, but haven't actually that hasn't actually materialized that continued upward trend. So but you're right. There's patterns in the macro, and there's patterns, that are happening within individual companies. Sorry, before we move on to the next point,
Yeah,
did
I
you
was
have
gonna
something
say
to say
with
about that?
Texbit, we got fortunate in raising our Series B earlier in Q1 last year. I think the path that we are continuing on is because we have a very healthy business. We are growing with our clients. We are category defining with tax and accounting. Regulations are helping. So there's a lot of tailwinds that were there when I was joining TaxBet 4 or 5 months ago. Balance sheet being healthy, people who are working there are really smart. They are plugged into government, plugged into enterprise, plugged into consumer. There's this flywheel that's going on. and the balance sheet being healthy. And I think it was really good raise last year that's allowing us to continue on our plans.
Very cool. Very cool. So, just kind of transitioning a little bit over here because we could probably talk about the broader market and the everything that's happening, but I want to focus in a little bit more on the topic and kind of like laser focus on what we're talking about here because and especially with your background from Facebook and Microsoft now moving over to a hyper growth startup. Talent's obviously top of mind, right? Like you've got to have people to build the product, and you got to have good people, like you said, that are mission aligned. So I'd love to talk a little bit more about Taxbit's philosophy, not just with the mission driven employees, but talk to me a little bit about how you guys nurture that talent, how you support them after they're onboarded, and how do you guys retain good talent and continue to make sure that you're making forward progress and that these people feel like they're making valuable contributions to the company.
So there are several dimensions to talent, right? It's not just about recruiting, but it's behavioral. How do you reward them? Merit, the culture that revolves it, feedback loops we create, as well as coaching and support that they are getting. So when I came in, we tackled all of these things, and then we started to talk about what is our philosophy of growing our talent. And some of the spikes here is like we want a merit-based culture. We want to make it a place where people do their best work, their best life's work, and they keep each other accountable for that. And the way you do that is you hire according to these expectations. You set expectations, you coach against those expectations, you create feedback loops, you create a culture where people are doing what you want when you are not around, when you're not in the room, right? It's defaults that matter 80% of the time. There will be things on the edges for sure. A good example of this is like I am trying to get hard conversations and accountability and feedback culture in. And initially, what happens at startup is you do whatever you need to do to get your customer happy.
Mm-hmm.
And that's no brainer, right? Like you're trying to
Right.
get PMF, you're existential, and you want to
Yeah.
continue doing that for a long time because of customer obsession and customer empathy. At the same time, there is a point in time when you go from 2 to 5 clients to 30 clients to now you want to go to 300 clients, you want to get to 10x, go from B to C to D. You want to start actually having those hard conversations on starting to say no for stepping back, building platforms, building automation, building scale, where you're
Right.
not reacting to everything that's coming at you. You're not swarming, the whole company is not swarming. So we are going through this really interesting shift where the company came here, has these habits, really good habits to get here as a startup. And now we're pivoting to be a platform and an engineering company where we have a roadmap, and then we are keeping people accountable for excellence and merit. Um, a really good story around this is just the culture of hard conversation not being there. And at Facebook, Cheryl would ask this in meetings, raise your hands if you have had a hard conversation last month. And hard conversation could be like peer-to-peer, could be manager to employee in your one-on-ones, in meetings. You're not shying away from hard conversation, and you want to provide tools and permission and coaching to have those. And hard conversation is not like, oh, I don't like you, Eddie. It's more like,
Right.
hey,
Right. Yeah.
this is our outcome we wanted to have. Here are the prioritization, and share the impact of what you did and what you could be doing better.
Yeah, and I love that because that's something that we strive for as well. But it's easy to get it wrong, right? Because especially for us, empathy is one of our biggest values, and understanding what somebody else is going through, and it's it's not always easy to execute on giving feedback
Yeah.
and somebody not taking it the wrong way, right? And
Yeah.
so it takes a lot more effort than you think. It's easy to say, oh hey, yeah, we're going to have hard conversations,
Yeah.
but actually having them and then being able to walk away at the end of the day and still having respect for the person that had to give the feedback and the person who received the feedback, and them being able to continue a working professional relationship. Like that stuff takes work and it's intentional. It's not stuff
Right.
that just happens by accident, because um, it's really easy to get passive aggressive in those conversations, or even aggressive in those conversations, right? So I think having a
You have to coach people for it, and you have to
yeah,
get permission. And like, no one is born with like, oh, I'm gonna have. It's very against human nature, right? You
yeah,
don't want to go and have confrontation day to day. Um, you want to tell people, look, we're gonna have an awkward conversation next time. Here's the things I observe. You want to go in, getting on the same page and why you are having the conversation.
yeah,
But you're completely right. Like coaching, permissioning, tools, all that goes in it.
yeah, and it's like, it's people like getting used to being outside of their comfort zones, because otherwise, how do you, especially for a company that's in hyper growth, how do you actually push the envelope forward on a daily basis, right? If you guys are just in your comfort zone and, status quo the whole time, you're not actually going to be out there affecting the
Right.
huge amounts of change that you're trying to, right?
And you
Um,
are going through hypergrowth is the slope. I think I wrote about this in my LinkedIn last time. It's this slope where you are already don't know what's coming next.
right.
Right.
Yeah.
It's like you're constantly pressuring on the slope to go even steeper. And there's a lot of things that are happening. New people coming in every day. We hired like hundreds of people last year, and it's gonna, like, last year we were like in less than 50 people. Now we're 200 people company, and we're gonna continue to hire more new people coming in, new projects coming in. You feel like you were going to do something in your backlog. Now that other person is doing it, you're letting go of your Legos. You are realizing that, you're not moving as fast. Maybe you're running, but still the company is running faster than you. So there's a
Yeah.
lot going on at the same time. So just acknowledging the phase you are in. So I say this all the time to the people I support. Look, it's going to be messy,
Yeah.
but the things we want to absolutely cling on is merit, ideas, feedback, accountability, because we are not going to be a 10x company, and it's a difference between $5 billion company to $20 billion company if we do not pivot to be a platform engineering driven company.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point too. And I think I read something today that I thought was really interesting. Actually, I think my wife forwarded it to me, but you kind of have to be in love with the journey, right? Instead of
Yeah,
looking to be at the destination. At a hyper growth company, you have to be excited about showing up and knowing that today's, it's going to hold some unknowns.
right.
But you also have to be able to balance that against, objectively, making forward progress. I'm interested to hear a little bit about your perspective and your opinion about, how do you continue to, especially going back to the topic of nurturing the talent, how do you support the talent, the people, the engineers on your team on a daily basis, knowing you're in this somewhat chaotic environment, knowing that sometimes you have to have some of those hard conversations. How do you balance that with actually making forward progress and like getting to what you guys would consider to
Right.
be the end results? And how does that differ from maybe your time at, Microsoft, for example?
Yeah, I think at large tech, you often get a blank check of consider infinite resources and then what you can deliver. And I think hypergrowth is more about consider only limited amount of resources, and then you have to deliver, not only keep your current customers happy, but also build for 10x, because that's what the hypergrowth is. Everything you're building today is going to become old tomorrow, and you'll rebuild all the time, and it's going to be okay. I think we lack, obviously, being a startup, we don't have as much investment yet in support and coaching and L&D and all the things that happens at bigger, larger tech. So it all goes from just documenting the expectation, hiring accordingly, and then doing the basics right, coaching your man. So your distribution path here is managers, right, and tech leads, and keeping, because I'm not talking to like 100 people every week. I'm probably getting one too many meetings with them, but not one-on-ones. So that this, anything you want to do in our company, and it's probably true for even larger companies like Facebook and Microsoft, the distro path is managers, but in larger companies, managers get coaching from L&D function as well as a lot of things that are happening around, and they have a lot of learning from observing other people who have been there for a long time. A lot of those don't exist in hypergrowth. So coming from those things and knowing what good looks like, translating that through our managers. So my strategy is, how do I grow my managers to do those things, as well as senior ICs to do those things and keep other people accountable.
Love that. And then I guess another question for you too is, how do you nurture the, kind of like, I call it engineer brain, but how do you nurture the problem solving, that, because a lot of times, especially in hyper growth startups, right, like you said, there's not always processes in place, there's not always defined things that you're supposed to do, it's not always, your job isn't always just go in and write
Right.
the
Mhm.
write code, like there's actually things that you kind of have to think outside the box, outside of your job description. A lot of times you're wearing multiple hats. How do you
Right.
nurture the people that are coming into Taxbit right now to kind of get them to start thinking about those things that may not, be part of their primary job responsibilities?
Yeah, I think we really want to invest in people to lean into what they're good at, right? In the end, so that and then isolate them to do that and give them time to do that. A lot of times there's a lot of things that they are doing outside of that primary track where we are leaning in, so they are doing their best work in the things they are good at. But if you're mismatching this and then letting people do what they're not good at, then no one is happy, things are not at their optimal outcomes. So I really am focused on giving people the lanes to lean into what they're good at, investing in it, matching the problem set. That doesn't mean they're not doing other things and wearing multiple hats, but really building capacity around that philosophy. Does that answer? Like, I think in general you can't avoid the multi-hat thing, but
Right. No,
you
I
can't
think,
hire generalists and do deeper work in certain areas too. So just being cognizant of letting people lean into what they're good at is always what I think about.
yeah, I really like that philosophy actually, because again, especially if you're working as a team, you might identify some people, and using an engineering team as an example, you might find people on the engineering team that are able to do a little bit more of a product owner role. Maybe some other guys that are a little bit better, or girls that are better at doing project management positions. There might be some people on the front end team that have some UI UX experience, and like being able to have those people, not only contribute where they're supposed to, but also being able to contribute where their talents actually allow them to. And then from there, you're kind of starting to, you're not expecting one person to be a product owner, a project manager, a UI UX designer, and a front end developer, but maybe being able to divide it up a little bit,
I mean,
kind
that's
of
how
a
you start in an early phase. I think the phase
right.
we are starting to want to do deeper work and the work that and then you allow internal mobility, right? So
Mhm.
people who are doing and they can start choosing. So we have people moving around. Someone who was doing data work now wants to do blockchain work, so they are easily moving into those types. Again, we have a lot to do, and impact is lying around, right? You can really
Yep.
go and they can solve any problem. So it's not about lack of what you're interested in. There is no work in that area. If you really are leaning into what you're good at and you want to do it, I would happy to just let you go drive that forward.
That's great. And so we're coming up on time. I'd love to just transition really quick to talk a little bit about what's next for TaxBit. And, um, I always like to talk a little bit about future tech. Right now, we're talking about, people that you guys are hiring and nurturing and supporting them. But, what's next for you guys? What's next on the engineering team's roadmap? What are you excited about as the VP of engineering? And how are you driving those initiatives they're going to move TaxBit into the future?
Yeah, so from the talent and what we are building, we are continuously hiring across Salt Lake City and Seattle is where our biggest footprint is. We are hybrid culture, 3 days in office, 2 days remote. We are starting to build small presence in SF, New York, and DC. New York and DC, we are starting to work with the government quite a lot. So IRS just got funding, if you're following the news, for a lot more expenditure. And we have been working with IRS to help them do some of the implementation for what's to come. Like regs are going to drop next year. But in general, I'm really excited about helping companies lean into tax and accounting practices so that they can have more digital assets on their books. And the things we are doing for that is building a single system of record for all digital assets transactions. So think about payment companies like PayPal, or exchanges like Gemini, FTX, or even custodians like NYDIG, or other companies that allow other businesses to do digital assets work. We are building a single system of record that will have knowledge of all of their transactions together, and we can start matching across these things. So imagine you're transferring from a wallet in Gemini to FTX or Coinbase. By regulation, these exchanges are supposed to tell the government that the money went out and then it went in. We can start matching cost basis so that the incoming exchange can then look at the right calculation on gains and loss. And we are very uniquely positioned to do this network effect sort of things as we get more and more data feeds from these things. I'm very excited about this network effect flywheel to realize. And if you have been in Web 2 and data space, you can see how powerful this all will be.
Yeah, that's super cool. And I think, like I said, I think you guys are at the forefront of some really revolutionary thinking right now. This is, I mean, nothing that I've really seen too much of around lately. There's definitely this stuff's becoming more mainstream, but the actual fact that you guys are talking about getting into work with the government, regarding regulations and, handling tax calculations. I love the cost basis too. I thought that was really cool that, because that's another
That's
thing
our
that
bread and butter. Think about, like, if you really want to realize the crypto dream where you're swiping a credit card to buy your coffee,
yeah,
you want to know which lots to sell, right?
right. Yeah, absolutely.
APIs can tell you and automatically tell MoonPay or whoever is offering the credit card to do tax, like sell the things that will give you tax loss advantages, for
Right.
instance.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, the other thing is too, you don't want to pay $45 for a cup of coffee, right?
Exactly.
So
So
I
I think
love
our
it.
APIs built on our data set and tax engine and the calcs that we are doing, it will start to become pervasive as more and more user adoption happens for digital assets.
Very cool. Well, Vivek, we are out of time. I appreciate you being on the show. This has been a great conversation. I always love talking about, people and culture. It's forefront, of my mind, but it's also, super important for driving hyper growth companies, forward. So I appreciate you taking the time to sit down and chat with me. This is our last show for the week. We'll be back next week with some new episodes, and Carlos will be posting those online soon. But thanks again, Vivek, and thanks to everybody for listening in. Hope everybody has a great Thursday afternoon.
Thank you for having me, Eddie. I had a blast. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, man.